Now that we are being hilarious, now you're gonna watch us.
Honestly, why do you think so many people are so like not financially savvy? Is because it's everything out there is so boring. So, if you made it this far with us, that's great. Welcome back to another video of the Summer and Troy session. So, we've talked about a bunch of different topics from estate planning to budgeting to insurance, etc. Now, we're going to be looking at retirement planning. Doesn't matter how old you are when you watch this video, whether you're old or young, it's going to apply to everyone because one day you're hopefully going to want to retire. You don't want to retire for the whole, you don't want to work for your whole entire life. So, what exactly is retirement planning?
Retirement planning effectively is a process or a study or a bunch of calculations that are run where somebody can get some sort of result that tells them if they follow a certain pattern of savings and if they maintain certain financial behavior, that they will be able potentially to retire at a certain age. And this is where it's done via software a lot of times. Unfortunately, there's a lot of calculators out there online that they tend to oversimplify the process and they don't really give good results. So, but we're going to go into those details in a little bit.
So you mentioned, there's a lot of calculation that is being done in retirement planning. What are the key variables that people should consider when doing these calculations?
So you want to try very hard to ensure the accuracy or the cleanliness of the data that you're utilizing initially. Remember, it's a financial formula that the data is going into, and it's providing a report or an analysis at the end of it. So, most important thing is obviously some of the easiest things is how much assets you have today, what are those assets invested in, how much cash you have, and all of that, and your current income. Those are very easy to come up with. But some of the harder ones would be to pinpoint within high level of accuracy what your total expenditures are going to be in retirement on monthly basis.
Something that Sammer has hammered into my head since I've been here is garbage in, garbage out. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard him say that phrase. Too many, unfortunately. Anyways, but it's accurate. I mean, what you put in is what you're gonna get out. You want to make sure you're putting the most accurate data in there because you need to be properly prepared. You can't pretend like you're making this much money now when you're actually not making that much money. You need to know what you're working with, what's realistic, all that type of stuff. So you mentioned all of your different expenditures that you have in your life right now as one of the data points you should be looking at. But are there other data points that we should be considering when planning for retirement?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there are definitely many data points that we should be armed with as we start the process. But we can categorize them maybe into 4 or 5 different categories. So the first one would be your monthly expenditures. Second one we also touched on is your desired age of retirement. I think that's an important point. I think it's important and realistic to discuss that with your spouse if you have a spouse and decide, are you both retiring at the same time? Is there an age difference and you're going to retire at different dates into the future? What is this going to look like? And what is the optimum in your mind, the optimum age for both you and your spouse to retire? Another point or another category would be insurance, for example. So if you happen to be a couple with, quite a bit of difference in age between you two, maybe having or understanding how much life insurance you both have today would also potentially can have an input on, believe it or not, on your retirement planning, because hypothetically speaking, the traditional way is that the man tends to be older than the women, and traditionally the women live longer than the men. So at some point in time, the spouse could live, 5, 10, maybe more years beyond the death of the husband. So having that life insurance could also be incorporated into that planning aspect based on that case. If they're very close in age, maybe it won't be as much for the planning aspect.
Yeah, I think that life insurance is very overlooked when it comes to retirement planning because there's such a bad rap on it. But if you actually look at it, the details of what it's meant to do, it could really save you a lot of time and headache in the event that someone passes away or anything like that.
You're so right, Jolisa. This is, I see that being overlooked not only by people that are looking to do retirement planning for themselves, but also by planners that are helping or attempting to help their clients. They tend to discount or not assign a high importance grade to life insurance in the planning aspect.
Yeah, because you could have fairly young parents who are doing pretty good in their retirement planning, but God forbid the breadwinner or the high income person of the house passes away. What's going to happen? How are they going to pay for the mortgage? If their kids are in private school, this, that, and the other, they're going to have to sell the house, all that type of stuff. And at a young age is really a good time to look at it, is because you're really in your hopefully best health. And the younger you are, the lower the prices are going to be as well. So I think that it's really something that needs to be looked at and considered more often, because I feel that a lot of people end up in sticky situations because it's often always overlooked.
Yeah, exactly. And let me take that a step further. Another category that's important to understand is where the sources of income that you're going to get once you are in retirement, right? So in the United States, most people tend to have access to Social Security once they've reached their full retirement age, or maybe even some of them consider taking it at a younger age. So Social Security would be one source of income. Um, One or both spouses may have still have access to a pension plan through their employer. Those plans were the norm 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now many employers are trying to get rid of them. So it's a toss up if you, in your case, happen to have a pension available to you or not. But it's important to understand, if you do, what it is and how does it work. Also, this is where I would incorporate that life insurance and say, once you are in retirement and one of you passes suddenly or passes before the other, let me use an example. I think that's easier to utilize. If my wife and I are both retired and we're relying on my Social Security and my pension, and my wife's Social Security, and let's say she does not have a pension, and then I pass, and in this case, my wife is going to lose approximately half the Social Security income because she's going to either get hers or mine, whichever is higher. And also potentially she could lose 100% or 25% or maybe 50% of the pension, depending on the payout schedule that we elected at the time. So this is where life insurance comes in even in retirement, post the need for to cover your mortgage and college education and all of that. It's also to potentially replace some of the lost income in retirement if one of the spouses is to go
Mm.
soon.
So you have mentioned Social Security quite a bit, but I have heard that, you know, 20, 30 years from now, there may not even be Social Security. How do you feel about that? And how do you think people should prepare?
That's a very, very big question when it comes to retirement planning. Social Security, as it exists today, has already been modified a couple times from what it used to be. In the past, everybody became eligible for Social Security at 65, and they became eligible for Medicare at the same time. But then, as we all know, our government continues to borrow money, and we continue to run at a deficit, which means we're spending a lot more money than we are making as a government. And ultimately, that continues to apply pressure with inflation and the increased prices and almost no savings into Social Security and Medicare. That continues to apply pressure to see, onto the system and the viability of the system. Will Social Security still be available in the future? 10 years, 20 years from now, would it look similar to how it looks now? That's obviously to be determined in the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But if you look at the pattern that we are going down and our ballooning debt, it sounds like there's going to have to be some modifications, and usually the modifications are going to be to the negative, not to the positive. So potentially, Social Security benefits may be reduced. They also may decide to increase the age of qualification. So now, if you're qualified for Social Security at 67, maybe based on new laws that will pass in the next few years, maybe that age becomes 69 or who knows, or 70 even. And potentially the monthly benefits may be reduced. So that's why one of the important things as you're looking into retirement planning is, when you're doing your calculations, run a scenario based on the way things are today, especially when it comes to Social Security. So anybody can go onto ssa.gov and get a projection of what their monthly income from Social Security would be at their full retirement age. But then I would also run a separate scenario at potentially maybe 75% where Social Security would be 75% of what it would be today. And I would also maybe run a scenario at Social Security income being 50% of what it is today. This way, you're trying to be proactive and you're trying to cover potentially worst case scenario if there's significant changes to Social Security into the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to run two different scenarios. One, if Social Security is going to be the same, and one, if it's going to be changing down the line, because you need to always be prepared for both the good and the bad. Because if you prepare for only the good and the bad happens, you're going to be out of luck. So, say you entered all of these variables into your report and it's done. Is it set in stone? You set and forget it? When do you look at it? How does that all go about?
Yeah, I mean, I usually tell my clients that the first time we run a retirement plan, we should consider that a baseline, right? That would be the first time, the first run. This is our baseline, and ensure that we are rerunning that plan on a regular basis, whether that is once a year or twice a year, even as we discover more things. Maybe now you've discovered changes with your employer. Maybe there's an excess benefit that you didn't have included last time. Maybe all of a sudden, um, there was a change in your employment, and now you have different set of benefits with your new employer. So there could be a lot of changes that go along the way, and the best way to capture those is to revisit this, because running a financial plan when you're in your 20s or running a retirement plan when you're in your 20s, it's great. But if you do it once and you don't do it again for 5-10 years, you're still in your mind following a path that plan recommended that may not necessarily continue to be viable because a long time has passed without any updates. That's why it's important for you to revisit that baseline and make the updates at least twice a year. I would think that would be a good interval between each time you run it. You take that information, especially as you get closer into retirement, maybe when you're in your late 50s, early 60s. Now you're within reach of that date. It's important to look at what's out there. I think you need to have a very open mind as to what your advisor is coming back to you with as far as potential solutions and what's available out there. Um, Again, you want to try to block that this is good, this is bad, very absolute answers to solutions that you tend to get from the media. And you need to start with a neutral slate and listen to what solutions that are available to you out there. Not every solution is going to work in your case. It depends. Again, each person is different based on their age, based on the age difference between the two spouses, based on their obligations financially to either their parents or their children, and so on and so forth. But that's why you have an advisor, and that's why you're utilizing the advisor to assist you in the planning aspect. And that's why you need to have an open mind and understand all the possible solutions that are available to you before you start to say, I want this, I want that, I want that. I think that's the best way to approach the process and continue to block. There's a very oversimplified media solutions to everything that comes into retirement planning.
Yeah, I think retirement planning is just pretty similar to your physical health. You're not going to just go to the doctor once every 20 years and expect nothing to change. You're going to want to do those yearly checkups and see, okay, is my blood pressure up or my cholesterol? Okay, what do I need to do to make that better, et cetera, and make those changes along the way instead of just coming back 20 years later with all these health issues that you're not prepared for. So I know you emphasize the importance of constantly checking up on your plan. What are some methods that you could stimulate different economic conditions that may impact the financial plan throughout the years?
Right. I mean, as any investor know, investment returns are very variable. They come in waves. They change year over year. Sometimes you go through 1 or 2 or 3 years of negative returns in a row before you get a positive return. Our business, we tend to use averages, right? So we say, hey, this portfolio averaged a rate of return of XYZ number over the last 10 years. Yeah, but over those last 10 years, nobody touched the money and we kept it invested. And that's why they're able to give you an average rate of return over 10 years. But if you're in retirement and you're starting to pull money out, those averages are no longer applicable to you because you are pulling from it. So if we do go through 1 or 2 or 3 years of negative returns, and on top of it, you're pulling from the portfolio, those averages, you throw them out of the window, they mean nothing to you because the next 7 years, if you had the first 3 years of negative returns, the next 7 years are not going to produce those averages because you already shrunk the pie by quite a bit through withdrawals. So it is important for you to have a discussion with your advisor about some stable sources of income in retirement. Those could be, for example, a portfolio of stocks that pay dividends. Those could be a portfolio or a ladder of bonds that pay interest. It could be some sort of a SPIA or DIA, and we can go. You can ask your advisor about that. But there's several options out there that provide a stable source of income and takes or lessens the variability that you're going to deal with in retirement. So it's definitely worth having that discussion the closer you get into retirement. Um, I think it's important, just like we talked about when it came to Social Security and about how you should run a scenario where Social Security potentially could be reduced. I think you should also continue to run scenarios where you're running a stress test onto that plan. You can include in there that potentially one of you lost a job or their income shrunk in later in their years, and potentially that meant less in pension or less in Social Security, things like that. So it is important to not always look at the best case scenario, but also look at the worst case scenario, so you are prepared and you're making the adjustments along the way. Having a plan helps you, especially early on. So if you're doing a retirement plan in your 30s, that helps you shape your financial behavior of how you determine and how you look at every spending decision. Because now in your mind, there's been a path that's been defined for you towards retirement. So automatically, your brain is going to remind you of that, not to veer off too far off that path. And that's why it's important to revisit periodically. It's a psychological thing, but you're just reminding yourself of where you are on that path and what that path is. That's why I say, please avoid the oversimplified solutions that you may run into online. Retirement is not a game of averages, and it is crucial for you to take this very seriously, because you only get one shot at this to get it right. Well, after you retire, if all of a sudden the planning was not done properly, it's too late. It's too late for you to go back and start again. So I hope that I'm making the point that this is extremely important to get right from the very first take.
Did you hear that? He said, get it right from the first take. Don't wait. Kind of rhymed a little bit, but don't wait. Don't push it off. It doesn't matter if you're young now and it feels like you're going to be retiring in 100 years. Like, it's going to be here before you know it. And if you don't start developing your plan, putting the money aside that you need to, getting the proper insurance, etc., I don't know what to tell you.
And if you haven't figured this out by now, we can certainly help. If you need somebody to help you along the way, if you need answers to some questions, and if you need to know how do you even start, call us and we'll be there for you.